Sometimes, the most terrible tragedies happen where they are least expected, in quiet families, behind the closed doors of cozy homes. The story we are about to tell proves that even those who are near us every day can fail to notice an approaching catastrophe. For when something important goes unnoticed, it can lead to a series of deaths. West Sussex, United Kingdom. A quiet rural area and the small village of Woodmancote. This is where the events of this story unfolded. A place where everyone knows each other, where neighbors greet one another over the fence, where crimes, if they happen at all, are usually just teenagers stealing a bicycle. But this is not a story with a happy ending, but rather one of a bloody massacre that became one of the darkest episodes of the British lockdown. 40-year-old Kelly Fitzgibbons was a caring mother and wife with a huge heart. She dreamed of taking her daughters, Ava and Lexi, to an amusement park, but the pandemic forced people to stay home. All they could do was imagine the trip the whole family so eagerly wanted to take. The girls would ask when they would go. Kelly would answer, "Soon, very soon," and she believed it. Kelly was known as an incredibly positive and kind person. Her silver donor card was proof of this. She had donated blood more than 25 times, regularly, without missing an appointment. The doctors at the transfusion center knew her by sight and would greet her first. By 2018, she had been married for several years to Robert Needham, a 42-year-old builder who ran his own business. Together, they created a family that seemed to be a model of love and harmony, at least from the outside. After high school, Kelly considered continuing her education. At that time, she wasn't planning on starting a family. She preferred to study, spend time with friends, and go to parties and bars between her college classes. Life was easy, carefree, no commitments. But over time, she began to want something different. The comfort and warmth of a home. The kind of thing that remains after the parties are over. At around the age of 26, she met Robert. In many ways, they were complete opposites. Kelly was sociable, energetic, cheerful, and a little loud. The kind of person who easily strikes up a conversation with strangers in a line. Robert was quiet, shy, a clear introvert. The type to stand aside at parties, holding a glass and observing. He never spoke rudely or raised his voice. Kelly's friends were initially surprised by her choice. Then they got used to it. They built a relationship based on respect and trust. Kelly's family welcomed Rob with enthusiasm. He gave the impression of a decent man, perfectly suited for the role of husband and father. He arrived on time for family dinners. He helped with cleaning without being asked. He would ask how he could be useful. His life revolved around his career. After finishing his education, he started working immediately. He chose construction, following in the footsteps of his father, who had taught him how to handle tools from an early age. He showed him how to hold a hammer correctly, how to drive a nail in with a single strike. He wasn't particularly talkative. He could spend an entire evening in silence, just nodding in response to questions. He preferred to show his love for Kelly through actions, not words. So when the couple moved into their own house, he took on the renovations, striving to create a cozy nest where he later planned to raise children. He worked in the evenings, on weekends, sometimes late into the night, when Kelly was already asleep. She would wake up to the sound of a drill on the other side of the wall. In August 2015, their first daughter, Ava, was born. The labor was long, difficult. Robert waited in the hallway, wringing his hands. When the nurse brought the baby out, he froze. He didn't immediately reach for her. It was as if he was afraid of breaking something. From that moment on, the new mother focused completely on the child, but tried not to grow distant from her husband. It seemed the couple had managed to preserve all the best aspects of their relationship. 2 years later, Kelly became pregnant again and gave birth to their second daughter, Lexi. In 2017, Robert's father passed away from age-related health problems, quietly, at home, in his sleep. After this, the growing family decided to move to Woodmancote, the same village in West Sussex where they would spend the last days of their lives. The choice of location was not random. Robert's parents were born and lived here. He had spent his childhood and youth here. He remembered every turn in the road, every tree in the yard. For him, it was a place of special significance. Now his mother was alone. Her son and daughter-in-law wanted to support her, to be close, to help with shopping, with repairs, with her loneliness. Kelly and her mother-in-law developed a warm relationship, which only grew stronger after the granddaughters were born. The older woman came over every day. She brought pies. She sat with the girls while Kelly worked. The family moved as close as possible to Robert's mother's house, just 2 streets away. The chosen property was part of the Needham family estate, but the house required major reconstruction. The roof leaked. The floors creaked. The wallpaper was peeling off in chunks. Robert, being a builder and fully understanding the scale of the work, took it on himself, with special zeal and diligence. He wanted to give his loved ones the very best. He worked tirelessly. Sometimes he forgot to eat. Only a small part of the house remained untouched. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a dining room. It was the minimum necessary for living with 2 children during the renovation. The rest was a construction site. Dust. The smell of paint. By the time the lockdown began, Robert had nearly completed the reconstruction. The couple was now living a full life in a spacious house. New windows, bright walls, the smell of fresh wood. On Friday, March 27, 2020, Kelly posted a photo of a family outing on social media. She, her husband, and their daughters had gone for a walk on a sunny day. The girls were in bright jackets. Robert was slightly behind, his hands in his pockets. Kelly was smiling at the camera. Everything looked ordinary. Nothing foretold the coming catastrophe. The next day, she made another post. She showed her friends in a group chat the climbing wall Robert had built for their daughters. A wooden structure in the yard, colorful holds. The girls were climbing and laughing. The comments under the post were enthusiastic. "What a great guy! Now that's a dad! You're so lucky with your husband!" Then, on that same Saturday, she had a video call with her twin sister, Emma. The women talked, sharing their experiences of life in isolation during the lockdown. The conversation was light and casual. Emma asked how things were. Kelly said they were fine. A little tired, but nothing serious. She mentioned they would be spending the evening at home. They had ordered food from a Chinese restaurant. Robert had left an hour before the call. He needed to stop by his work office, after which he planned to be back just in time for the dinner delivery. Everything seemed completely normal. Routine. The sisters were constantly in touch, but during this period they called each other even more often. The conversations helped them stay calm and get through the difficult time. The isolation was oppressive. The news was frightening. They longed to hear a familiar voice. Emma said goodbye to Kelly and promised to call the next morning. Before bed, she sent a short goodnight message, but didn't get an instant reply as usual. She looked at the screen, waited a couple of minutes. She figured Kelly was busy with the children and had simply fallen asleep. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, the next morning, her sister was even more surprised. Picking up her phone, she realized Kelly still hadn't replied to her message. This was completely unlike her. She usually replied right away, even in the middle of the night if she woke up. Emma immediately dialed her sister's number, but no one answered. The ringing. Long. Empty. The woman tried not to panic, but she felt an inexplicable anxiety. Something was wrong. Kelly and Emma had always had a very close bond, as twins do, but there was no way to quickly drive over and check on her. She lived too far away. 200 kilometers, a 3-hour drive. It was early morning, so she convinced herself that everyone was just sleeping and Kelly would call back later. The phone lay beside her. Emma made coffee, glancing at the screen. But the hours passed, and her calls went unanswered. Her anxiety only grew. It became physical, a tightness in her chest. After noon, Emma clearly realized she was afraid she would never hear or see her sister alive again. This irrational thought seemed strange. Where did it come from? Why was it so strong? Since she lived 200 kilometers away from Kelly, she contacted relatives who lived closer and asked them to go to her sister's house and check what had happened. Unfortunately, no one was able to do it quickly. Some were at work, some didn't have a car, some were in quarantine themselves. So Emma decided to contact the police and ask them to conduct a welfare check. She dialed the number with trembling fingers. She explained the situation. They called her back quite quickly, but the news they gave was not at all what she had expected. Immediately after Emma's call, several patrol officers were dispatched to the house. 2 units. A routine welfare check, as it was logged. When they arrived and knocked, no one answered. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. And there were no obvious signs of trouble. The cars were there. A bicycle was by the porch. Toys were on the grass. But the police immediately noticed the absolute silence. It seemed strange. This was a couple with young children who are usually quite noisy. Besides, at that time of day, they should have been in the yard. Girls of that age don't sit quietly. The silence was unsettling. The officers decided to walk around the property. The couple's cars were in the driveway, meaning everyone should have been home. One officer went to the right, the other to the left. While circling the house, one of them looked into the living room window. Through a partially open curtain, he saw something disturbing. The feet of a person lying on the floor, bare, motionless. They probably needed help, or maybe not anymore. All the doors and windows were intact, so they had to force the main entrance. With a shoulder, the door gave way on the 3rd try. When the officers entered, it was immediately clear. This was a crime scene. The smell, the silence, the feeling that time had stopped here. Emma was informed immediately, told that all 4 of her relatives were dead. They said nothing more. Protocol. The investigation had begun. The police moved slowly, weapons drawn, step by step, checking corners. They suspected the perpetrator was armed and still in the house. The first person they found was Robert. He was sitting in an armchair in the living room, leaning back. The man had been shot in the head, and a shotgun lay next to his body, a double-barreled shotgun, an old model. The weapon was immediately seized and sent for forensic analysis. They initially thought it might have been used to defend against attackers. Maybe someone broke in. Maybe he tried to protect his family. When it became clear the house was empty, one of the officers contacted the station to check if any nearby hospitals had admitted people with shotgun wounds. Perhaps the perpetrator was injured. Perhaps they had made it to a doctor. But the check showed nothing of the sort in the last 24 hours. Not in any clinic in the county. In general, the town was very quiet, so a crime of this magnitude seemed unthinkable. Murders don't happen here. Continuing the search for the other family members, the officers found Lexi and Ava in their rooms. Children's wallpaper, stuffed toys on the shelves. The older 4-year-old girl lay in a pool of blood on the floor, just a meter from the door, face down, one arm stretched forward. The position of her body suggested she had been standing in the doorway, heard something, and was about to come out to check when she was attacked. The younger 2-year-old girl, likely having witnessed her sister's death, had tried to hide in the room. She had wedged herself into a corner between the bed and the wall. But it didn't help. Both had suffered fatal shotgun wounds at close range. Kelly was the last to be found. She was in the master bedroom, in bed, under the covers. The woman hadn't had time to react to the attack. It was obvious the killer had caught her by surprise. Perhaps she was already asleep. Perhaps she was reading before bed. Her phone was on the nightstand next to her. She too had received a blast of buckshot to the face, which instantly ended her life. The pillow was soaked with blood. Additionally, the family dog was lying in the living room near Robert's body. A Labrador, an old, good-natured dog. The animal had been killed in the same manner as the people, a shot to the side. Subsequent ballistics analysis showed that everyone had been shot with the same weapon, the shotgun, the same shells, the same caliber. When Emma was told that 4 people had died without any details about a shooting, she assumed there had been a gas leak. The boiler exploded. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Anything but murder. Not here. Not them. She called Carrie, Kelly's best friend, to deliver the terrible news. Her voice trembled. Her words were jumbled. Neither of them yet suspected the scale of the tragedy or its true causes. The detectives first spoke with Carrie, Emma, and Robert's mother. Long conversations, taped statements. The neighbors were also questioned, but no one had noticed anything unusual. The evening had been quiet. The cars were parked in their usual spots. Lights were on in the windows. No screams, no gunshots. Based on the state of the dried blood and the degree of rigor mortis, they concluded the murders were committed between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous day. Checking the victims' mobile phones helped clarify the timeline. The call between Kelly and Emma ended at 10:30 p.m. The last message from Kelly was sent at 10:35 p.m., a heart emoji to a friend. At 11 p.m., Emma sent a message that went unanswered. Based on the circumstances, The shooting likely began immediately after the sisters' conversation. This narrowed the time frame to between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., 30 minutes, during which everything fell apart. Kelly was killed first, then the children. Robert died last. It was strange that the family dog was also shot, even though the animal offered no resistance to the attacker. It didn't bark, it didn't charge, it just lay there. This led to grim thoughts. Why kill the dog? Each victim was shot with a shotgun. Initially, it was hypothesized that the incident could be a botched robbery. Burglars broke in. Something went wrong. Panic. Gunshots. However, no signs of a break-in were found. Not on the doors. Not on the windows. Moreover, for some reason, the perpetrator left the shotgun right in the house. What kind of robber leaves their weapon behind? Nothing of value was missing. The television was in place. The laptop was on the table. Wallets were in purses. The robbery theory collapsed. The gun was immediately sent for ballistics analysis, and its serial number was checked. It turned out the shotgun was registered to Robert, legally purchased, with all the paperwork. While the victim's loved ones wondered who could have done this, the police hypothesized that the perpetrator had in fact never left the house and was also dead. It was suspected that Robert, next to whom the shotgun was found, was responsible for the crime. To confirm their suspicions, they spoke with the couple's inner circle. No one had any idea there might have been problems in the family. Absolutely no one. Relatives and friends knew Robert and Kelly as loving parents, a husband and wife to be emulated. Both were non-confrontational and maintained warm relationships with those around them. They came to birthday parties. They helped their neighbors. They smiled. However, Robert's mother was well aware of the shotgun that had suddenly appeared in her son's life. When their first daughter was 1 year old, the man suddenly became set on the idea of getting a firearm license. Where did this desire come from? Why now? Kelly thought it was an inappropriate time for such a purchase, but she took into account the difficult period in their family life associated with the new baby. The baby wasn't sleeping through the night, constant fatigue. The woman decided that if it would make Robert feel better, if it would become his hobby, a way to distract himself, then he should indeed get the license. Kelly saw it as a harmless hobby, like fishing, like a garage full of tools. No one feared for their life or safety. Robert had never shown aggression, malice, or violence towards his loved ones, not once. He didn't even raise his voice. He himself explained it by citing life in a rural area and their complete defenselessness in the event of a robbery. "We're alone out here. It would take the police half an hour to get here. We need some way to defend ourselves." To obtain the license, Robert had to fill out an application and answer a series of questions, some of which required documentary proof. Among them were questions about criminal history, medical restrictions, and mental illness. There was a whole list of conditions and violations that would disqualify an applicant from receiving a firearm permit. It included depression, anxiety, thoughts of harming oneself or others, substance abuse, and criminal episodes, especially those involving violence. Robert answered no to all these questions. He checked the right boxes. He signed at the bottom. But in reality, he was lying on almost every point. He had a minor criminal record. As a teenager, he had stolen a bicycle from another youth. The incident did not involve violence. At least, that's what was recorded in the report. After receiving a modest punishment, the young man was fully rehabilitated. A suspended sentence, community service. A positive character reference. However, the lie should have been a red flag. While the stolen bicycle might have seemed like a minor offense, the man's mental health was extremely unstable. His entire life had been a decades-long struggle with problems that his loved ones never even suspected. He knew how to hide it. He knew how to smile when necessary. He knew how to nod and say the right things. He tried to conceal all of this so that his gun license would be approved. When an officer from the firearms licensing unit visited Robert in person and informed him that he needed to consult with his primary care physician, the man still did not admit to his lies. He sat calmly, looked the officer in the eye, spoke confidently. He handed over the completed application, in which he denied all problems. All clear, everything in order. However, the officer took his job seriously. He visited the general practitioner who had treated Robert his whole life. The medical records went back to his teenage years. The pages were filled with small handwriting. The doctor was well aware of his mental health problems and disclosed them. Depression, anxiety, episodes of exacerbation. But for some reason, the licensing officer decided that Robert's difficulties were in the past and not serious enough to deny the license. He hadn't sought help in a long time. That must mean he had overcome it. All the documents were approved. Stamp, signature. Later, this caused immense outrage among the families of both Kelly and Robert. The lie itself, stated in an official document, had no impact on the decision. He was approved anyway. How could that be? Why didn't anyone double-check? Why did no one ask additional questions? Yet, even when all this came to light, a mystery remained. What drove Robert to open fire in his own home? Checks showed the shotgun was the murder weapon for all the victims. It bore only Robert's fingerprints, his fingers, his palms. Furthermore, he was the only one with the key to the gun safe. He kept it on his keychain with his car keys. Kelly had always been wary of it, avoiding even touching the safe, while her husband repeatedly took the gun and drove to an improvised shooting range to practice. He would return content, relaxed. The situation was complicated by the complete absence of suicide notes. There was nothing of the sort on the suspected killer's computer. No files named farewell or explanation. He had not made any suspicious browser searches that might indicate he was planning the crime. He didn't search for how to kill a family. He didn't read about poisons. He didn't study survival rates for gunshot wounds. No one had ever heard him say he was unhappy in his marriage. Not a word. It seemed as if what happened was a spontaneous act of aggression. Something just snapped. And that was it. It was suspected that Robert's mental health problems could have acutely worsened and overwhelmed him with new force. Accumulated stress. The lockdown. No escape. Nevertheless, he had not contacted his doctor in recent months, as if everything was fine. No records, no calls. There was even a theory that the motive was financial, and after killing his family, the perpetrator couldn't bear the guilt and took his own life. Maybe debts, maybe loans, maybe insurance. But the investigation showed he would not have gained any significant financial benefit from the deaths of his wife and children. They did not have large life insurance policies, just standard, minimal ones. The payout would have only covered the funerals. Before the bloody conclusion, no one suspected what Robert was struggling with. That's why people didn't notice conflicts or problems in the family. Or maybe they didn't want to notice. Kelly never complained about anything. She told her friends everything was fine. She told her parents not to worry. It seemed that she and the children were content with everything. However, the quiet Robert kept far more secrets than it seemed at first glance, layers of them, one after another. Kelly was generally against discussing what happened behind the closed doors of their family life. It's our business, it's no one else's concern. It's likely she didn't know many things herself, or didn't want to know. The woman kept a diary in which she periodically wrote down what worried her most. A simple, soft-cover notebook, a ballpoint pen. The entries were sporadic, sometimes several pages in an evening, sometimes weeks of emptiness. She derived immense joy from motherhood and smoothed over all the negative moments, perceiving them as just a release of tension her husband had built up from work. He's tired, he's stressed, he just snapped. However, some entries were quite disturbing. Even the investigators, who had read hundreds of similar cases, winced. During the investigation, it became clear that fatherhood did not bring Robert the joy he had expected. Ava and Lexi loved their father. They would run to him when he came home from work, hug his legs, reach their little arms up. He was always caring towards them, picking them up, kissing the tops of their heads. But in reality, he found it extremely difficult to cope with the growing demands. The crying of children irritated him. The endless whys drove him mad. Toys underfoot infuriated him. As his wife dedicated more and more time to domestic chores and the girls, he immersed himself in his work to shield himself from these irritants. Work became his refuge. There were serious reasons for this behavior, but they were not obvious. During the work week, it was almost impossible to find Robert at home. He left early, he returned late. Even on weekends, he didn't always spend time with his loved ones. Robert often went fishing, leaving Kelly to raise the children alone. Fishing rods. A thermos of tea. Silence by the river. Meanwhile, Kelly also worked. She was a secretary at a law firm and was raising the children on her own. Daycare, doctors, after-school clubs, lessons. She herself perceived her husband's constant departures as a desire to maintain his personal space. The woman knew he was an introvert, somewhat withdrawn, and liked to be alone. But she never connected it to mental health problems. He just needs to recharge, to breathe. Perhaps Kelly was too focused on the children to notice where things were heading. Or perhaps she did notice, but was afraid to admit it. To the experienced eyes of detectives, there were precursors to this behavior. But Kelly had no experience with people suffering from mental illness. She had no idea how it manifested or what to look for. There was nothing like it in her family. Everyone was healthy. Everyone was normal. In reality, her husband had needed help for many years. His mother knew this. But the woman did not speak about the situation, so her son wouldn't be seen as a sick person. Shame. Fear of judgment. In their generation, such things were not discussed. As she told investigators, Robert had been unstable since childhood. He would cry for no reason. He would freeze, staring at a single point. he would burst into screams. In his youth, this escalated into a kind of rebellious period. He became extremely withdrawn, resisting even for no apparent reason. He refused to go to school. He was rude to teachers. The attempts to manage the teenager culminated in aggression and the stolen bicycle. Moreover, he had knocked its owner down. The boy fell, broke his nose. The incident was hushed up thanks to his parents' efforts. They apologized, paid for the medical treatment. Besides, it was a first offense for the boy, so he got off with a symbolic punishment. After that, Robert never had problems with the law again. At most, he received fines for traffic violations, speeding, an expired insurance policy. But it turned out he had dealt with his rebellious phase in his own way. He had found another outlet. The first sign of serious problems, which even Kelly noticed and mentioned to loved ones, was a skin rash. It started as an irritation on his hands, red spots, itching, but the situation seemed to be rapidly worsening. It spread to his face, his neck. Periodically, his skin condition would improve, then get worse again. The cycle repeated. Robert managed to convince his wife that it was related to the building materials and paint products he had worked with for years. An allergy, work-related, nothing serious. Her husband assured her that everything was fine. He was using special creams and the skin problems would soon go away. He bought ointments, he wore gloves. It all sounded convincing. There had always been trust in the family, and Robert hadn't lied before. At least, the deception wasn't uncovered until after the shooting. The harsh truth was that for years, Robert had been struggling not only with depression and an anxiety disorder, but also with a drug addiction, amphetamines, small doses, regularly. The damage from his periodic substance use affected not only his physical condition, but also his mental health. The paranoia grew, the anxiety intensified. It was a vicious cycle. During the autopsy, the medical examiner confirmed that Robert had obvious signs of serious damage due to addiction. His liver was enlarged. His blood vessels were damaged. His heart was overworked. A toxicology report revealed that at the time of the attack, he was also under the influence of substances. The concentration was high, possibly higher than usual. During her last phone call, Kelly told her sister that Robert had gone to his office for work. In reality, he had left the house to use drugs. A search of his work office revealed numerous items used for drug consumption: baggies, pipes, traces of powder on the table. Yet he had managed to hide his addiction from everyone, even his wife and mother. He took small doses, just enough to function, to stay afloat. Although the couple's relationship seemed perfect from the outside, confirmed by numerous family photos on social media, stories from Kelly and the girls, and testimony from loved ones, in reality, by the time of the tragedy, the precursors to the coming collapse had already appeared many times. The cracks were forming, unseen, but they were there. In the messages between Robert and Kelly, there were numerous signs that the woman feared her husband. She repeatedly asked him to control his anger, but didn't tell her loved ones what was happening. "Please, calm down," she wrote. "The girls are scared. I'm scared." The messages were deleted, but they were recovered from the phone. It could not be definitively established, but it was believed that the woman may have also been a victim of domestic violence. No medical records, no police reports. But the signs were there. Before the lockdown, Kelly didn't always even sleep at home. Sometimes she would go to a friend's house with the girls, sometimes to her sister's. She would pack a bag, wake the children in the middle of the night, leave quietly. She likely feared her husband would behave erratically in front of the children, or worse. To all questions from her loved ones, she answered evasively, never blaming anyone, pretending she had simply missed them. "I just wanted to see you," she would say. "It's boring at home." She would smile as she said it. But corresponding entries and worries were found in the woman's diary. Everything was in there. A month before her death, Kelly suggested to her husband that they take a break from their relationship. But a serious conflict erupted after that. Shouting, broken dishes. The neighbors heard, but didn't intervene. It wasn't their business. After that incident, she wrote in her diary for the first time that she was afraid of Robert. 3 words: "I am afraid of him." But most of all, she feared that the children would lose their loving father. After all, he was good with them, caring. He built them a climbing wall. So she decided to handle the situation, seeing it all as a trial, something to endure. It would pass. To everyone around them, particularly her loved ones, Kelly continued to portray her relationship with her husband as perfect. Photos on social media, smiles, hashtags about love. Even her twin sister, Emma, with whom Kelly spoke daily, had no idea what was happening. And this was despite the fact that they talked about everything. What struck Emma most was that despite the constant pressure and possible domestic abuse, she never saw any bruises on her sister's body, not a single one. She would check specifically when they met. She would look at her arms, her neck, nothing. However, as practice shows, the cruel behavior of husbands does not always leave obvious marks. Psychological abuse is not visible. Control doesn't leave bruises. Humiliation doesn't bleed. According to detectives, on the evening of March 28, 2020, Robert went to his work office where he used drugs, more than usual. Maybe he ran out of money for his next dose. Maybe he just snapped. He was struggling to cope with the realities of lockdown. A number of jobs had significantly decreased. The phone was silent. Clients were canceling projects. Not only could he no longer earn a proper living as he used to support his family and fund his addiction, but it had now become much harder to maintain distance from his wife and children. Everyone was home, all the time. And for him, it was so important to be alone frequently. Silence, space. By the time the shooting began, the tension had reached a breaking point. Every day added more pressure. After analyzing the killer's personality, investigators concluded that he had not planned the crime. There were no suspicious browser searches left. The history was clean. There was no suicide note in the office or at home. No explanations, no reasons. Therefore, they hypothesized that after he returned home, a conflict began with his wife. It's hard to say who exactly provoked it. Maybe she asked the wrong question. Maybe he came back already angry. But it ended quickly, and everyone went to their rooms, except for Robert. Doors slammed. Silence fell. It was at that moment that he flew into a rage and decided that things could not go on like this. He couldn't take it anymore. That's it. The limit. The man walked to the gun safe, dialed the code with trembling fingers, opened it, took out the shotgun. Heavy, cold. He loaded it and shot his wife first. She was the only family member capable of resisting and stopping him from carrying out his bloody plan. One shot. The silence after the blast was deafening. The children heard the noise and tried to come out of their rooms. Ava opened her door first. She stood in the doorway. She saw her father with the gun. The older girl was shot in that position. She fell backward. Lexi screamed and tried to hide. She huddled in a corner, closed her eyes. Naturally, the small child had no chance of survival. The 2-year-old girl did not understand what was happening. It's hard to say at what exact moment the dog was killed, but Robert didn't spare the life of even his beloved pet. The dog approached, nuzzled his leg. He shot it too. After that, the man sat down in the armchair in the living room, leaned back, breathed heavily, the shotgun on his lap, and shot himself in the head. The last sound in that house. The man's mother asked Kelly's family for permission to bury her son with his wife and children in the same cemetery, side by side. The woman didn't believe he hated them. She couldn't believe it. She considered him simply a victim of addiction and circumstances that had turned a decent man into a brutal killer when he snapped in an instant. "He was a good man," she repeated. "He was just sick." She cried while talking to investigators. But Kelly's relatives were adamantly against such a decision and did not give their permission. He didn't deserve it. He was not family. Kelly, Ava, and Lexi were buried together. 3 white coffins, small ones, 1 large. The church couldn't hold all the people. They stood outside. Strangers wept. Robert was buried separately, modestly, without any announcements. Only his mother was present, no one else. The story of Kelly, Robert, Ava, and Lexi added to a grim statistic. In the United Kingdom, more than 20 such cases are registered annually. The numbers are cold. Behind each one is a family. On average, so-called familicide occurs twice a month. Every 2 weeks, someone kills their family. The perpetrators are overwhelmingly men, and the victims are women and children. This statistic has not changed for decades. When the world of a person with an unstable psyche collapses, a distorted perception of reality can lead them to commit terrible things. Logic breaks down. Boundaries blur. Nevertheless, there has been a slight improvement in recent years. For instance, in the early 2010s, 45 to 50 such cases were recorded per year. And since 2018, this number has been reduced by almost 2/3. Awareness campaigns are working. Hotlines are saving lives. However, this does not diminish the fact that dozens of lives are broken and cut short in every one of these cases. Kelly's parents never recovered. Emma still wakes up in the middle of the night to check her phone. Friends avoid talking about it. The neighbors sold their houses and moved away. The saddest part is that all of this could have been avoided. It would have been enough to be attentive to the details, to ask for help, and to help loved ones, to notice in time, to ask directly, to not turn away. Sometimes one conversation can change everything. Sometimes it's enough to reach out a hand. Not always, but sometimes it is enough.